Most assume that the accumulation of hours and the friction of labor are the primary currencies of progress. They treat time as a physical barrier to be broken through with brute force, believing that the more one strains against the world must eventually yield. Yet, the silent observation of reality reveals a different geometry altogether. There is an invisible architecture that dictates why some find an effortless resonance with their environment, while others, despite their intellect and discipline, only encounter persistent, cold resistance. Effort is often the loudest signal of an internal displacement that has not yet been addressed. You may have noticed a recurring pattern, a subtle, chilling dissonance between what you do and what you receive. It is as if the external world is reading a script you did not know you were performing, responding not to your words, but to a hidden frequency. This is not a matter of luck, timing, or unfair advantages, but a precise reflection on a mental center of gravity that remains unshifted. When the internal position is one of seeking, the world has no choice but to maintain the distance between you and the object of your desire. The reality you inhabit is never an accident. It is an automatic response to a state you have yet to renounce. To chase confidence is to announce to the vacuum that you currently lack it, a realization that creates an inverted pursuit where the goal retreats at the same pace you advance. Most individuals spend their lives trying to convince the shadow to move without ever shifting the object that casts it. They operate under the illusion that confidence is something to be built or earned through external trophies, rather than natural law that is triggered only when internal identity stops negotiating for its right to exist. Until the center of gravity is reclaimed, every action is merely a sophisticated form of begging for reality that cannot hear you. There is a dangerous coherence that occurs when the internal state no longer looks outside for confirmation. At this level, reality ceases to be a judge and becomes a servant. It is an invisible coherence that functions as indifferently and certainly as gravity. If the internal blueprint contains a single shred of incoherence, the external world will dutifully manifest that fracture in the form of delays, missed opportunities, and the hollow repetition of the same year under different names. You have not been fighting people or circumstances. You have been fighting the mathematical certainty of your own internal frequency, which dictates exactly how much space you are allowed to occupy. The realization that you have not lost time, but simply operated from a state that could not possibly yield a different harvest, is the beginning of a cold and necessary clarity. To continue in this state is to opt for the same inevitable friction, guaranteeing that the future remains nothing more than a reorganized version of the past. The door you are standing before does not lead to a new technique or a better strategy, but to the restoration of an order that has been working against you because you ignored its existence. To turn away now is to accept the loop as your final destination, while to proceed is to finally align with the law that makes the world move for you, instead of against you. The spectacle of unrewarded labor stands as one of the most persistent and quiet tragedies within the human experience. Everywhere, there are individuals who possess an almost religious devotion to the concept of effort, believing that the accumulation of physical fatigue is a mandatory prerequisite for the acquisition of substance. They study, they strategize, and they exhaust their vital energy in a relentless pursuit of a horizon that seems to retreat at the exact speed of their advancement. This is not a failure of intelligence or a lack of character. It is the observable manifestation of a profound structural error. They operate under the assumption that the world is a physical obstacle to be moved by physical force, ignoring the silent laws that govern why things move toward us or away from us. When the results do not mirror the intensity of the struggle, the common reaction is to increase the friction, to push harder and sacrifice more time. Yet this only deepens the cycle of exhaustion. There is a hollow quality to the success that is chased through brute force, assuming it is ever reached at all. You see it in the eyes of those who have made it, but remain in a state of constant, low-level panic, fearing that the same effort required to build their world will be required to keep it from collapsing. This is because their position was never internalized. It was merely occupied by force. They are like actors who have memorized the lines of a powerful man, but still feel the tremors of the beggar in their bones. The external world, which is a perfect and indifferent accountant, eventually reconciles these accounts. It does not matter how many hours are logged if the underlying identity is one of scarcity. The world eventually returns you to the state you never truly left, regardless of the trophies you have temporarily collected. The quiet observation of reality reveals that the most significant shifts often occur when the individual is seemingly at rest, or when their actions are so fluid they appear effortless. This is not because they are lucky, but because they have stopped fighting the medium. When you see someone who consistently encounters fortunate coincidences, you are witnessing the result of an internal alignment that has rendered struggle obsolete. They are not chasing the world. The world is adjusting its shape to accommodate their internal density. Most people, however, are terrified of this stillness. They equate inactivity with failure, and so they continue to generate noise, believing that the noise will eventually turn into music. They do not realize that the music is already playing, but it is being drowned out by the sound of their own frantic knocking on doors that were never locked. Why is it that the most disciplined students of success often find themselves surpassed by those who seem to care less? It is a question that creates a bitter friction in the minds of those who play by the rules of effort. The answer lies in the fact that the rules of the world are not the rules of the mind. The world rewards action, but the mind governs the quality and the outcome of that action. If the act of studying or working is fueled by the fear of not having enough, the action itself becomes a prayer for more lack. You are effectively telling the universe that you are in a state of deficiency, and the universe, being a faithful mirror, provides more opportunities for you to feel that deficiency. Every hard-working hour becomes another brick in the wall that separates you from the resonance you seek. We must acknowledge the cold reality that most human endeavor is a sophisticated form of compensation for an internal void. We build empires to hide our insignificance, and we seek wealth to silence the internal whisper that says we are not enough. But the void cannot be filled from the outside. Any structure built on a foundation of not being enough will eventually inherit the qualities of that foundation. It will be unstable, it will require constant maintenance, and it will never provide the peace it promised. The realization that effort is often a symptom of misalignment is the first step toward a different kind of power, one that does not need to shout to be heard or run to arrive. The error of modern achievement lies in the total misunderstanding of the origin of action. Action is never a primary cause. It is always a shadow cast by an internal state that preceded it. When one acts from a position of perceived lack, the action itself carries the signature of that deficiency, broadcasting a signal that reality interprets with absolute precision. You may present a facade of competence and strength to the world, but if the internal architecture is vibrated with a quiet frequency of desperation, the world will respond only to the vibration, never to the mask. This is why two individuals can perform the identical task with identical skill, yet one finds an open path while the other meets an invisible wall. The world is not listening to what you do. It is responding to the place from which you are doing it. Consider the nature of a command. A command is not a request. It is a statement of fact that expects no resistance. Most people do not command their reality. They bargain with it. They say, "If I do this, will you give me that?" This is a position of subordination. It signals to the field of possibilities that you are not the master of the house, but a guest hoping for favor. Reality, however, has no capacity for mercy or favor. It only has a capacity for reflection. If you approach it as a subordinate, it will treat you as one, providing exactly enough to keep you in that position of seeking. The invisible coherence of the mind requires that your external circumstances match your internal rank. If your internal rank is one who struggles, your external world will be perfectly organized to provide you with meaningful struggles. This hidden frequency is active even when you are asleep. It is the background noise of your existence, the baseline of your identity that you have accepted without question. It is found in the way you breathe when you think about your bank account, the way your posture shifts when you walk into a room of influential people, and the way you justify your current limitations to yourself. These are the true commands you are sending to the world. Your conscious desires are like a thin layer of oil on a vast ocean of subconscious certainty. The oil may shimmer, but it is the ocean that moves the ship. To change the direction of the ship, you do not move the oil. You change the currents of the deep. The dissonance between what you say you want and what you actually expect creates a state of internal static. This static distorts your perception, causing you to miss the very opportunities that would lead to your goals. Or worse, causing you to sabotage them when they appear. You might call this bad luck or poor timing, but those are merely labels for a rejection of reality that does not fit your internal blueprint. The mind is a protective mechanism. It will actively destroy any external success that threatens your internal identity of being a struggler. It would rather you be poor and right about the world being hard than wealthy and wrong about who you thought you were. This is the invisible wall that no amount of discipline can climb. Every movement made in a state of internal incoherence is a command to the universe to maintain that very incoherence. You are essentially asking the world to help you stay exactly where you are, while your conscious mind screams for change. This is the ultimate trap of the modern striver, using the very tools of change to cement the status quo. The more you try to be confident, the more you highlight the fact that you are not. The more you try to be wealthy, the more you focus on the gap between your current state and your desired one. It is a game that is lost the moment it is played as a pursuit. The signal is sent, the shadow is cast, and the world dutifully follows the script of the shadow. There exists a cruel and perfect symmetry in the way the external environment reacts to the intensity of human wanting. To want something is to announce an absence. To pursue it with frantic energy is to confirm to the subconscious that the object is currently out of reach. This creates a psychological and energetic distance that no amount of physical movement can bridge. The more one runs toward the objective, the more one reinforces a state of being the one who is chasing, and the law of the mind ensures that the chaser remains exactly that, forever behind. This is a paradox of the closed field. When a mind is tight with the tension of needing a result, it creates a repelling force. The very urgency that feels like commitment is actually the mechanism of exclusion. Why is it that the moment one truly stops caring about the outcome often settles quietly at their feet? It is because the stopping of care is actually the cessation of the signal of lack. When the tension of wanting is removed, the resistance in the field disappears. You are no longer announcing that the thing is missing. You are simply existing in a state where its presence or absence does not define your center. This neutralizes a repelling force and allows the natural law of resonance to take over. Most people find a state of non-wanting impossible to achieve because they equate it with giving up. In reality, it is the opposite of giving up. It is the ultimate form of claiming, for it assumes a thing is already a part of one's internal landscape. The pursuit of confidence is an inverted chase where the goal retreats at the same pace you advance. If you believe you need to build confidence through a series of successes, you have placed your power in the hands of the very world you are trying to master. You have made yourself a hostage to results. If the results are good, you feel powerful. If they are bad, you crumble. This is not confidence. It is a temporary emotional high derived from external validation. True confidence is a structural law that precedes a result. It is a dangerous realization that the world does not give you permission to be confident. It is your confidence that gives the world permission to provide the results. By chasing the feeling, you admit you do not have a state. The seeker is the only obstacle to the finding, for the act of seeking is a constant affirmation that the treasure is elsewhere. Consider the gravity of a planet. A planet does not seek to attract moons. It does not exert effort or feel anxiety about whether the moons will stay in orbit. It simply possesses a certain density and mass, and the moons have no choice but to follow the curve of the space the planet creates. Human influence operates on the same principle. When an individual possesses a high degree of internal density, meaning their internal state is solid, coherent, and unswayed by external noise, they create a mental gravity. People, opportunities, and wealth are drawn into their orbit not because of what they do, but because of the curvature of the reality they project. Most people have the mental density of cloud, easily scattered by the slightest wind of criticism or failure. To shift from a seeker to a center of gravity requires a total renunciation of the chase. It requires an uncomfortable period of stillness where you allow the external world to stop being the source of your identity. This is where most people fail. They cannot handle the silence of the void before the new resonance begins. They feel they must do something to make things happen, and in doing so, they reactivate the old frequency of the chaser. They go back to the game of force, and the field closes once again. The secret is not in the movement, but in the becoming of a stationary point around which the world is forced to turn. Every individual possesses a mental center of gravity, a point of equilibrium that dictates what they can naturally attract and what they will inevitably repel. This center is not formed by occasional thoughts or temporary bursts of optimism, but by the heavy, silent assumptions that sit at the core of your identity. If your internal gravity is set to a frequency of struggle, you'll find yourself magnetically drawn to circumstances that validate that struggle, regardless of how much you claim to want ease. This is the silent order of the mind, a mathematical certainty that organizes your financial, social, and personal landscape to match your most deeply held, often unacknowledged, self-definition. Reality is merely a giant mirror, reflecting back the weight and density of your internal position. You do not get what you want. You get what you are. This is a law that operates with the same indifference as the law of thermodynamics. If a man who feels like a failure suddenly wins $1 million, the law of his internal gravity will immediately begin to work on that money. He will find ways to lose it, waste it, or be cheated out of it, until his external reality once again matches his internal state of failure. Conversely, if a man with the internal density of wealth is stripped of everything, the world will quickly rearrange itself to return that wealth to him. The external environment is plastic. The internal blueprint is the mold. To try to change the environment without changing the mold is an exercise in futility. We must look at the invisible architecture of our lives. Look at the patterns that repeat. The same type of difficult boss at every job. The same plateau in income regardless of the industry. The same feeling of being overlooked in social circles. These are not coincidences. They are the structural supports of your internal house. They exist because you have built a mental space that requires them for its own consistency. Your mind prefers a familiar hell to an unfamiliar heaven, and it will work tirelessly to maintain the safety of your current limitations. This is a hidden resistance that people mistake for the world being against them. It is not the world. It is the architecture of the self protecting its own boundaries. To change this architecture requires more than just positive thinking, which is often just a thin layer of paint on a crumbling wall. It requires a deep, almost surgical removal of the core assumptions that have defined your life. You must become willing to let go of the victim identity that has perhaps given you a strange sense of comfort or an excuse for your lack of progress. This is a death of sorts, the death of the person you have been. Most people are not willing to die to their old selves. They just want their old selves to have more money or more fame. But the law is absolute. You cannot take the old state into the new kingdom. The price of the new reality is the total abandonment of the old one. This internal position is a silent one. It does not need to be announced, and it certainly does not need to be defended. In fact, the moment you feel the need to defend your position or convince others of your success, you have already lost it. True density is quiet. It is a presence that is felt rather than heard. When you move from a place of internal authority, the world feels it and responds accordingly. People find themselves saying yes to you without knowing why. Opportunities appear that seem custom-made for your talents. This is a result of the invisible coherence, the silent order of mind that has finally stopped fighting itself and has instead aligned with the gravitational pull of its own conviction. The realization that reality is an automatic response can be both terrifying and profoundly liberating. It suggests that the obstacles you have faced, the delays, the betrayals, the stagnation, were never external enemies, but echoes of an internal dissonance. When the mind sends out a fragmented signal, the world returns a fragmented life. It is as if you have been trying to adjust the image on a screen by touching the glass, rather than changing the film in the projector. This automatic response is indifferent to your merit, your history, or your perceived goodness. It operates with the cold neutrality of the law of physics. If the internal blueprint is one of confidence that is contingent on external proof, it is not confidence at all. It is a dependency. Consider the nature of a mirror. If you stand before it with a frown and demand that it show you a smile, the mirror cannot comply. It has no will of its own. It can only reflect what is there. You can scream at the mirror. You can study the mirror. You can try to paint a smile on the surface of the glass. But the reflection will only change when the face before it changes. Most people spend their lives painting smiles on mirrors and wondering why the result feels fake. They try to act confident. They try to act rich. They try to act successful. But the mirror sees through the act. It reflects the actor, not the character. To see a new world, you must become a new person, not just a better performer. This indifference to the law is your greatest ally. It means that the world is not judging you. It is not punishing you. And it is not testing your worth. It is simply answering you. If you are currently experiencing a lack of confidence or a lack of financial flow, it is because you have provided the input for that specific output. There is no moral weight to it. It is simply a technical error in the alignment of your internal state. Once you remove the emotion from the failure, you can begin to look at the process as a scientist looks at an experiment. If the result is not what you wanted, you change the variables of the internal state and observe the new response. The world has no choice but to provide a different reflection if you provide a different face. Many people find this concept difficult because it removes the excuse of external circumstances. It is much easier to believe that the economy is bad, that the industry is crowded, or that you were born on the wrong side of the tracks. These excuses provide a cushion for the ego, allowing you to remain in a state of stagnation while feeling like a victim of uncontrollable forces. But the law of the mind is the only truly uncontrollable force. Everything else is a variable that responds to it. When you accept that your reality is an automatic response, you stop being a passenger in your own life and start realizing you're the one who has been driving into the same wall over and over again. True confidence, the kind that is dangerous to the status quo, is a state of being that exists before the evidence arrives. It is a decision to inhabit a new frequency regardless of what the current mirror is showing. This requires a certain level of psychological courage, for it means walking through a world that says you are nothing while internally knowing you are everything. It is a period of temporary incoherence where the old world is fading and the new one has not yet solidified. Most people flee back to the old world during this transition because they cannot stand the lack of immediate feedback. But those who can remain in the new state, despite the silence of the mirror, eventually find that the mirror has no choice but to catch up. The discomfort you may feel in this moment is the friction of an old structure beginning to collapse under the weight of a new awareness. You are beginning to perceive that the years spent in pursuit were not a waste of time, but a period of operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of the machinery of life. You were not incapable, nor were you cursed. You were simply misaligned. The machine was working perfectly, delivering exactly what your internal state demanded, even if your conscious mind was pleading for the opposite. This realization strips away the comfort of being a victim of circumstance and places the entire architectural responsibility back into the silent depths of your own mind. We have been taught that merit is the path to reward, that being good or worthy is what unlocks the gates of prosperity. But the laws of the mind do not care about merit in the way we traditionally define it. The mind cares only about coherence. A bad person with a perfectly coherent internal state of power will manifest power more effectively than a good person with a fragmented state of doubt. This is a hard truth for many to swallow, as it seems to violate our sense of cosmic justice. However, once you understand that merit is an internal state rather than an external record of deeds, the justice becomes clear. The only merit that matters in the law of the mind is the merit of having the courage to claim a state and remain faithful to it. The feeling that something has always been out of place is actually the signal of your potential resonance trying to break through the crust of your old identity. It is the friction between who you are currently acting as and who your internal structure is designed to be. This friction is often experienced as anxiety, restlessness, or a sense of impending doom. Most people try to medicate this feeling or distract themselves from it, not realizing it is the very compass they need. That discomfort is telling you that you are currently occupying a space that is too small for the energy you possess. It is a call to expand internal boundaries, not to work harder within the existing ones. As you stand at this threshold, you must realize that the time you think you have lost was never real. Time is only a factor in the world of effort and struggle. In the world of mental alignment, there is only the now of the state you inhabit. When you truly shift your internal position, the results can manifest with a speed that defies your old understanding of cause and effect. Years of stagnation can be wiped away by a single month of true coherence. This is because you are no longer walking toward a destination. You are allowing the destination to collapse into you. The distance between you and your goals was never measured in miles or years, but in the degrees of your internal dissonance. The field is now prepared. You have seen the futility of force, the illusion pursuit, and the cold neutrality of the law that governs your life. The silence that follows this recognition is not an empty one. It is a silence of a reset. You are no longer the victim of an unfair world, but the architect of a responding one. The question is no longer, how do I get what I want? But who must I be to make the world's response inevitable? To turn back now is to return to the loop of friction, knowing exactly why it is happening. To move forward is to begin the process of internal reordering that renders the old struggles impossible. The dust of the chase begins to settle, leaving behind a silence that is not empty, but heavy with the weight of a long-delayed recognition. You have spent years treating the world as a resistant wall, never suspecting that the resistance was merely the echo of your own internal tension. To stop running is not an act of surrender, but an act of supreme positioning. It is a moment the hunter realizes that by standing still, they become the coordinate toward which all things must eventually converge. The frantic noise of trying is replaced by the cold, clear frequency of being, a shift so subtle it is almost invisible, yet so profound it alters the very gravity of your existence. You now carry the uncomfortable knowledge that every delay and every closed door was a precise response to a state you refused to abandon. The rules of the game were never hidden. They were simply too obvious to be seen by eyes blinded by the sweat of effort. The world has always been a faithful servant, reflecting your internal rank with a loyalty that borders on the cruel. To understand this is to lose the luxury of blame, for the architect cannot fault the building for the flaws in the blueprint. The external world is a mirror that has finally stopped distorting, showing you that the only thing standing between you and the result was a vibration of your own need. Attempting to return to the old ways of struggle will now feel like wearing a garment that has become too small for your expanded awareness. The friction of the hustle and the desperation of the search will generate a heat that you can no longer ignore, for you have seen the mechanism behind the curtain. The ghosts of your former doubts may still whisper, but they have lost their authority. They are merely the fading echoes of a frequency that no longer find a home in your internal landscape. There is no going back to the comforting illusion of being a victim of circumstance, as the resonance of your true position has already begun to rearrange the field around you. True confidence does not shout. It does not even speak. It is a presence that occupies space with such absolute certainty that the space itself seems to bow in recognition. It is the difference between the one who asked for a chair and the one who is the owner of the house. While the world continues its frantic dance of needing and wanting, you have found a stationary point where the need is replaced by a quiet, dangerous possession. This state is not earned through merit or granted by permission. It is claimed by the simple, sovereign act of internal alignment. You are no longer waiting for the evidence to arrive. You are the cause that makes the evidence inevitable. This recognition is the beginning of a transformation that requires no further instruction, only the courage to remain faithful to the new frequency. The shift has occurred in the depths where the silence is absolute, and the external world is even now recalibrating its response to meet the weight of your new center of gravity. If the resonance of this order feels more like a memory than a discovery, it is because you are finally returned to the rank you were always meant to hold. To refine this alignment further is the only logical step for those who no longer wish to fight the mirror. The shadow cannot move until the object does.